introduce it, what the Buddha means by feeling. And then in the next time, we'll look at at sentience itself and the vulnerability of sentience. So tonight is more or less a build-up. We're going to look at feeling, and we're going to focus on the teachings of Dhammadinna on feeling. So let's begin. I just begin by saying what I always say in the practice workshop that we do when I do retreats, practicing Vedana, what it is. First of all, we have the Pali word and the Sanskrit word Vedana. This is usually translated feeling. And what it refers to is the affective aspect of our experience. In other words, that which has the capacity to move us. So we could talk about the cognitive aspect of experience, head, what we know, what we understand, and the affective aspect of experience, heart, what we feel, how we respond. So Vedana is all about the feeling, the heart aspect of experience. So the English word would be affect, which refers to that which has the capacity to move us. So in English, we might say, I was moved by that, or that was very moving. So this means I was affected by it. I was moved by it. So Vedana, or feeling, moves us to respond to what is happening. That's its essential role. People often get it mixed up with emotion. It's not emotion in the Western sense of the word. Feeling is like the flavor of food. So if you think about the experience of eating, as you're chewing away, there's lots of physical sensations involved in eating. It's hardness and softness, dryness and wetness, crunchiness and smoothness, and so on. And there's also the flavor of the food. Now, the flavor is not the sensation, and the sensation is not the flavor, but they are intimately intertwined. When we have sensation, we have flavor. When we have flavor, we have sensation. So they are, using the Buddha's language, they arise and cease together. What moves us, what stimulates our responses when we eat is flavor, roughly speaking. So we are moved to take more if the flavor is pleasant. We are moved to take less if the flavor is unpleasant. And we are moved to indifference if we can't find any flavor. But what moves us, what stimulates our response is flavor. So this is feeling. Any questions so far? Is this making sense? If you've got any question, just zoomically raise your hand and we can talk about it, because it will get technical. Now, there are three categories of feeling, each with its corresponding movement. Pleasant feeling moves us to reach out and hold. Painful feeling moves us to resist or to reject, to distance ourselves or to defend ourselves. And when we don't know what we are feeling, in other words, when feeling is neither painful nor pleasant, we are moved to dullness, doubt, and confusion. But you notice that whatever the category of feeling, we are moved. Now, like the English word feeling, Vedana can refer to what we experience and also to a way of experiencing. So if you use it as a noun, what we experience. So I might say, you hurt my feelings. So feelings are a something. Or we might talk about it as a way of experiencing, not a what, but a how. So we might say, I think that's a good idea, but I can't help but feel that it isn't. Now that statement makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Like if someone said that, you would know what they're talking about. So thinking indicates one way of experiencing, feeling indicates another. Tonight, what we're emphasizing, what we're talking about is feeling in this second sense, a way of experiencing rather than what. And when the Buddha uses the term Vedana, but in particular, when he uses verbs based on the root. So Vedana is a noun, feeling. It's based on the root vid, to sense, to feel. And words based on this root suggest intimacy, so a close encounter with something. So for example, when the Buddha's talking about mindfulness of breathing, at one point he talks about becoming intimate with body during this practice. And he says the practitioner feels the body. And the verb that he uses is patisangvedati, which is one of the verbs based on vid. Yeah, you get vedati and vedayati. These are the two most common verbs. So when he uses these verbs, what he's suggesting is intimacy, getting closer and closer and closer. Sometimes he will use verbs based on the root pas, to see. There he's suggesting distance and detachment. So for example, vipassana, insight, anupassana, tracking, and so on. You making sense so far? Are you with me so far? Any questions? Okay, so where do we find feeling? The Buddha says the 6 sense fields condition contact, contact conditions feeling. So this is basic teaching of dependent arising. So he begins with the sense fields. The sense fields are the sensitivities, the 6 sensitivities that together constitute a sentient body. In Pali, this is Sat-Vijnana Kaya. Kaya is body, Vijnana is awareness, Sat means with, a body with awareness, a sentient body. And this is what we are. We are sentient bodies. And this is where all experience happens. So each of us is a locus of sensitivity. It's like we're a little bundle of sensitivities located somewhere. If you want to know where, it's here. And we are surrounded by an ocean of stimuli. So sense data is flowing into our sentient body through the sensitivities of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, minding. Because for the Buddha, mind is another sensitivity. And each sensitivity is a receptivity to corresponding sense data. So, for example, when the Buddha talks about the I, E-Y-E, he's not talking about the physical organ, the way a doctor might. He's talking about the sensitivity of that part of the body which is receptive to light and color. So the eye is a sensitivity that is receptive to a particular kind of data. So the ear for the Buddha is that part of the body which is sensitive to sound and so on. Mind is also a sensitivity. It's sensitive to non-physical data. And each of the 5 physical sensitivities picks up its own unique stream of data. And all of these streams flow into the mind, which has its own stream of data. And the mind brings all of these together and creates a meaningful world. That's its job. And this process occurs through what the Buddha calls phassa, usually translated contact. So he says, this is a very common formula, depending on eye sensitivity and forms, visual awareness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. Contact conditions feeling. So then he goes through all of this, the sensitivities with the same sentence. So contact, this is where experience takes place. This contact translates the Pali word phassa, which literally means touch. So the Buddha is saying we are touched by what streams through our senses. And this touch, which is happening here and now, is the immediacy of experience. And you note, an experience is already a complex event. It's an arena in which three elements converge. And the three elements are sense sensitivity, sense object, and awareness. The three of them converge, and something happens. So contact conditions feeling. If contact is the arena of experience, feeling is found in the response to experience. So let's say, for example, I hold my palms like this, and then I bring them together very slowly so they gently touch. Touch is an impact. There's warmth and softness. And when I experience this, my body immediately responds. It relaxes and opens. This response is where we find feeling. Does that make sense? So you notice the intimacy between touch and response. And so this relationship between contact and feeling is very intimate. It's stimulus and response. Where there is stimulus, there's a response. Where there's a response, there is a stimulus. So stimulus and response, contact and feeling, these are different sides of the same coin. They are intimate, they are inseparable, like a sunflower turning towards the sun, like a sleeper turning in the night. So that's our introduction to Vedana. Any questions so far? Am I making sense?
Can you, sorry, someone is.
You, that was you.
That was me, okay. Hey, Patrick, you said something about Vipassana. I missed what you said. I only heard you saying insight. Is it?
Well, you've got, the Buddha uses verbs based on vid, to sense, to feel. And then from that root, he creates a verb, vedati vedayati, to feel, which is all about intimacy. Yeah. But he also uses words based on the root pas, to see, like insight, vipassana. Mm. And there he's talking about not being intimate with, but he's suggesting detachment, distance.
Yeah.
So if I'm having insight into something, it's like I'm over here, oh, what's that over there?
Yeah.
So sometimes he uses language that suggests go in really close. Sometimes he uses language that suggests pull back, create a distance.
Yeah.
And the going in close is the affective, the feeling aspect. The creating a distance is the more cognitive head aspect.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on. Let's go to Dhammadinna and her teaching in Chula Vedala Sutta, the Lesser Dialectic. If you're looking for this, it's Majjhima number 44. And Dhammadinna is an Arahant Bhikkhuni. So Arahant means fully awakened. And Bhikkhuni means female nun. So she's I'm pretty sure she's the only woman to give a discourse in the early teachings. The Buddha's teachings are called sutta. And it's not just the Buddha who delivers sutta. Some of the senior teachers also deliver sutta. But to become a sutta, it means that the Buddha has, in some way or another, listened to the teaching or heard about it, and he's put his stamp of approval. He says, yes, I would have said exactly the same thing. And then that teaching becomes a sutta. And Dhammadinna is the only female, the only woman who gets her own suttas, 2 of them. So she must have been pretty important. Now here she's having a dialogue with her ex-husband, and they come to the subject of Vedana, feeling. And this is how she explains it. She says, whatever is felt physically or psychologically as pleasant and soothing is pleasant feeling. Whatever is felt physically or psychologically as painful and hurting is painful feeling. Whatever is felt physically or psychologically as neither soothing nor hurting is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. So that's her explanation. Now, you could summarize by saying whatever is felt is feeling, which frankly doesn't tell me a lot at all. In fact, when I first read this, I thought, yeah, and? But when we look at her full statement, we get a sense of where she's coming from. Whatever is felt as pleasant and soothing is pleasant feeling. Whatever is felt as painful and hurting
We may have lost Patrick. We're trying to get him back. I can't hear him.
Am I back now? Yep. Okay, that Zoom had a sudden heart attack. It wants me to upgrade.
Yeah, I think the Zoom played up, yep.
It cut me out. So let's go back. Dhammadinna's explanation. What she's talking about is feeling as a way of experiencing. So she's saying whatever is felt as pleasant is feeling. Whatever is felt or whatever is experienced as pleasant is feeling. Whatever is experienced as painful is feeling. In other words, she's talking about a feeling as, an experiencing as. And this represents a form of knowing or understanding, but it's much more intimate than how we usually speak of knowing something. For example, when we say, I know something, what we're doing is like, I know Melbourne, for example. We're implying a subject-object distinction. There's a separation between knower and known, between the I that knows and the thing that is known. So I know Melbourne. There's me here, there's Melbourne there. There's a separation. Feeling, in contrast, implies a knowing that's more intimate and therefore less nameable, less amenable to being pinned down as something. In other words, feeling does not tell us what we are experiencing, but how we are responding to it. And in fact, it's not even telling us that it's us that is responding. It's just saying there's responding. Is this making sense? This is getting very obscure because we don't usually think of things in this way.
Can you say the last sentence? I got confused. Not telling what responding.
A feeling is not telling us what we are experiencing, but how we are responding to it. And feeling is not telling us who's having the feeling. It's just telling us the response. Is that making sense? If it doesn't, just feel your confusion and we shall continue. It might become clear, you never know. Feeling is found in a response that moves us before we have had time to think about it. It's one way of looking at it. Now, there must be some kind of understanding involved, because if we are moved to reach out and grab hold, or if we are moved to resist or reject, there has to have been some kind of assessment of the event. But this is an assessment that is so foundational, so non-cognitive, that it's built into the fabric of experience itself. In contrast, we can look at the Buddha's teaching on chaitana, usually translated intention, but perhaps more accurately, choice or decision. This is chaitana, choice is the decision to act that arises from the perceived significance of an event. Now, choice is extremely important in the Buddha's teaching because it represents how we construct the direction of our lives, the choices that we make as we go through our lives. He even creates chaitana, choice, or decision or intention, with karma. So karma obviously is really central to the Buddha's teaching. And for him, chaitana is karma. Intention is action, or choice is action. So this is really, really important. Where does Vedana, feeling, fit into this? Feeling represents the world as given to us that demands a decision. Feeling represents the world that demands a choice. The fundamental decision that we have to make is about this experience event, this which is happening right now. How is it positioned in relation to my interests and me? Is it pleasant to be held on to? Is it painful to be rejected? Is it neither to be completely ignored? Feeling has us already deciding, already engaging. Choice, intention, karma, they come in later as a kind of review of a commitment we've already made. So we are already committed. Then we notice what's going on. Then we decide what to do about it. So this is what I mean where like feeling goes really, really deep. And this means it's so elemental that it's very difficult to understand with concept. It's very difficult to talk about, which I think is one reason why people don't talk about it very much. Basically, at this level of elemental response, we've come up against the limits of language. Remember we talked about knowing something. In order to speak of something, to think of something, that something has to be an object out there, separate from the speaker, separate from the thinker. But feeling gives us a world before we recognize it as being separate from us, in which we are already entangled, already committed, already doing something, already responding. And it's this very response that helps create the world that we can recognize as separate from us and demanding our choices and our decisions. Is that making sense? Or have I completely lost you? Shall we plow on regardless? So feeling is found in our response to what is happening now. And the Buddha says there are three fundamental responses depending on the three categories of feeling. If the feeling of a sensation is pleasant, we're moved to hold. If the feeling of a sensation is painful, we are moved to resist or reject. If the feeling of a sensation is neither painful nor pleasant, we are moved to ignore it as being beneath our notice. Or if we do notice it, we're moved to confusion and doubt about what to do about it. Should I hold it? Should I reject it? Hold, reject, hold, reject. So Dhammadinna goes on to say, pleasant feeling is pleasant in its stability and painful in its instability. Painful feeling is pleasant in its instability and painful in its stability. Neither pleasant nor painful feeling is pleasant with understanding and painful without understanding. So what she's drawing attention to, first of all, were the first two feelings, pleasant, painful. She's drawing attention to its stability. In other words, she's saying the very ordinary, everyday thing. If the degree of pleasure is the same, then something that gives me pleasure for a day is better than something that gives me pleasure only for 1 hour. Conversely, the longer a painful experience lasts, the worse it is. And this is, of course, this is what makes any kind of chronic pain so difficult to endure. Now, and these changes in pleasant and painful reveal what we really do and do not like. So, for example, how do we know that we are enjoying this experience? In part, it's because of a sense of contrast. We notice we are upset when it ends, when it changes. How do we know we are not enjoying this experience? In part, it's because of a sense of contrast. We notice we are pleased when it changes. So pleasure and pain is bound up with change, with instability. The third category of feeling is the odd one out. This is neither painful nor pleasant. Dhammadinna does not talk about how it changes over time, but whether or not we are aware of it. She says that when we are clear about this kind of feeling, it is pleasant. When we are not clear about it, it is painful. So that which is neither painful nor pleasant changes into that which is either pleasant or painful, depending on the quality of our awareness. Our capacity to discern feeling changes feeling. So Dhammadinna has introduced a new relationship. She's talking about the fluidity of feeling, which we're going to go into more in the next talk when we talk about sentience. Feeling is constantly changing. Pleasant and painful is bound up with stability. Experience flows. It's constantly changing. And this has a huge effect on how we feel. So I like this. Bugger, it's already over. Oh, I really hate this. And this has been sticking around forever. So our relationship to time is bound up with our sense of pleasant and painful. With the third one, the third category, it's not about time, it's about awareness. Now, what Dhammadinna is suggesting is that that which is neither painful nor pleasant, this third category of feeling, is something which is here but not understood. And then later on, so if you look at time, how it develops over time, it's still here, but now it's understood. And it's this shift in understanding that changes it. So this feeling changes as it moves in and out of awareness. When we are not aware, neither painful nor pleasant feeling is painful, which is an interesting thing to say, because it does throw up the obvious question: how can something be painful when we're not aware of it? I would have thought that's a pretty obvious question. And perhaps, and this is just my own speculation, that what Dhammadinna is referring to is the painful quality of a felt sense of obscurity and its accompanying confusion. Have you ever had disturbed sleep? Would you say it was pleasant or painful? But how can it be either if you're asleep and you don't know what's going on? But if you don't know what's going on, how do you know you've had disturbed sleep? I think this is the kind of thing that he's getting at. What about restless distraction when you're meditating? Have you ever had restless distraction when you're meditating, when you don't really know what's going on? Have you ever had that experience? It's like you suddenly enter into this kind of restless, distracted state. But you know that when you're distracted, you don't know that you're distracted. And then later you realize, oh, I'm distracted. Have you ever had a state of restless distraction? And you've suddenly come out of it, oh, I'm really out of it. Was that pleasant or painful? I think what Dhammadinna is suggesting is it's painful. But what makes it painful is not knowing it. The absence of awareness, or the weakness of awareness. So something is felt. Otherwise, there would be no feeling. And if there's no feeling, there's no contact. And if there's no contact, there's no experience at all. This is really important, one of the really basic things about feeling. There's always feeling. Always. It's impossible to have an experience without feeling. But something can be felt as here, but only vaguely, obscurely. And that vagueness has a painful quality to it. She's suggesting that delusion itself hurts, which is interesting. But when it emerges, when we confront it directly, then it's not so bad. It might even be pleasant. And I think we've all experienced this in the meditation practice, when we're bugged by something, and then we face it in the meditation. Oh, this is what it is. Oh, and it improves. And I think where this matures is in the experience of equanimity. Equanimity, it's in a state of equanimity, and this is where mindfulness practice is designed to take us. A state of equanimity, the feeling tone is genuine neutrality. It's not pleasant, it's not painful, but it's clear, very, very subtle, but very clear. And when you notice it, and it can be easy to not notice it because it's so subtle, but when you notice it, it's actually more pleasant than pleasant, which is odd. Any questions? That's it, by the way. I've come to the end. Any questions or comments?
I had a question. Is the inverse sort of true, that there's